sit and listen to my dear brother Robbie. It's eloquent. Cicero and Quintilian define eloquence as wisdom speaking. So even if I have some deep ideological and political disagreements, he's still a wise brother. He's got something to say, something that each and every one of us can learn from. I want to begin by acknowledging, you can't hear me? Is it coming on now? The spirit of the technology, let it flow, let it flow. How is that now, my brother? Is it all right? Wonderful. You didn't miss much. I said something positive about it.
Repeat that part.
I want to salute the Trinity Forum and the work that is being done, not just here in Atlanta, but around the country, trying to cultivate a culture of paideia, a very deep education, the formation of attention and cultivation of a critical self, and the maturation of a courageous and a compassionate soul. And I think it has much to do with the leadership of our dear sister here, Cherie. She is a dynamo. Let's give it up for our sister. She's done a magnificent job. I was just so inspired when I walked in and I saw Dorothy Day, the long loneliness, being part of the reading, along with Martin King and Nelson Mandela and a host of others. It seems as if that can be on the fringe of marginal, but actually in the end, every democratic experiment is so fragile and it's so precious. And you have to have people who muster the courage to constitute the glue to hold it together. And reading text, reinforcing self-examination is part and parcel of what it is, not just to be a citizen in a democratic experiment, but most importantly, just trying to be a decent person with some integrity before the worms get our bodies. I tell my students for the last 41 years, each time they enter my course, you have entered this course to learn how to die. Yes, I thought I was just here for a grade. What is he talking about? But it has everything to do with the tradition that has shaped me. You see, that I come from a great tradition of a grand people. 400 years of being traumatized, still trying to teach the world something about liberty. 400 years of being hated, still trying to teach the world something about love. It could be John Coltrane's Love Supreme, just turn it on. Let it soak your soul. And you can hear the Socratic tones of self-examination, self-interrogation, self-scrutiny. You can hear line 24a of Plato's Apology. The cause of my unpopularity is parrhesia, P-A-R-R-H-E-S-I-A, which is frank speech, plain speech, unintimidated speech, fearless speech, free speech, allowing what is inside of you to be transfigured by your own discipline and technique and craft so that what you have to say can relate to others, not just at the level of their minds, but at their hearts and souls. I could just turn on Martin Luther King's speech or Nina Simone's song and let it soak you in that way, and black people have no monopoly on it at all. Bob Dylan is a vanilla blues man. So was Bruce Springsteen, so was Janis Joplin. We haven't got the Franz Kafka or Chekhov yet. Because a blues man or woman is not an entertainer primarily. There's someone who's rooted in a Socratic legacy of Athens, but also mediated with a prophetic legacy of Jerusalem that says hesed, that spreading of steadfast love, that spreading of loving kindness to the orphan, the fatherless, the motherless, the hated, the weak, the vulnerable. And you take those two towering legacies of Athens and Jerusalem. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Plato, Aristotle, Sophocles, Empedocles, and yes, the East, yes, Africa, yes, indigenous peoples have much to say, profound things to say. But for those of us who have been primarily shaped by those two legacies, that say what? That say, lo and behold, if we don't engage in deep paideia, deep self-cultivation of the cardinal virtues, yes, of justice, of temperance, of courage, but also of hope and faith, and most importantly, love. And that is no plaything. The unleashing of greed and hatred, not just in the last few decades, it is a perennial problem for the kind of primates that we are, made in the image and likeness of God. Every generation has had the fundamental query of what kind of human being you're going to choose to be from your mama's womb to tomb. What kind of virtues, what kind of values, what kind of vision will you enact? And the example that Brother Robbie was talking about is so very important. Immanuel Kant says in the Critique of Pure Reason, examples are the go-kart of judgment. The judgments that we make have everything to do with the examples made available to us. The various models that we will imitate and emulate and build on. And I must just add as a footnote in terms of these texts that you're reading, I hope you all get a chance to read the great Gilbert Keith Chesterton. Maybe his classic of September 1908, Orthodox.
We actually have a reading on that.
Is that right? So y'all ahead of me in this. That's or James Cone's The Cross and the Lynching Tree. Variety of voices, so that in order to deal with high levels of polarization and high levels of balkanization and the inability to build the kind of bridges that we need to build, I think we're going to have to take very seriously the anthem of black people, which is lift every voice. But it doesn't say lift every echo. We've got to get out of our echo chambers, get out of our group mentality, get out of the in-crowd way of engaging the world. You can't be a blues woman or a jazz man if you're just an echo. You're going to stay in Mike's basement after dark. But if you're going to be a great one, you're going to find your voice the way Aretha found her voice. Or you find your voice the way James Baldwin, after imitating Henry James and the King James Version. He never went to college, but the college went through him. He had to find his voice. And how do you find your voice? You find your voice through, first, bouncing your voice up against the voices of the dead. And part of our problem these days in a market-driven society, obsessed with titillation and stimulation, obsessed with gaining access to success, and more being obsessed with the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. You just want to be successful by any means. This is a major message for our young people that has led toward the spiritual blackout in so many of their hearts and minds and souls. Life is all about spectacle. It's all about status. It's all about celebrity, publicity, orientation. And they find out what? They get up there and their souls are still empty. A joyless quest for insatiable pleasure is a dominant feature of our culture. So how do we find joy in finding our voices? By connecting with the best voices of the past. It could be a Lincoln. It could be Ida B. Wells. It could be a whole host of persons. But some sense of history, that remembrance and reverence and resilience that has been distinctive of Hebrew scripture. The great Abraham Joshua Heschel, whose voice we need so badly today. You read his book on the prophets, that's another text. Now that's a big one, so you're going to have to read various selected chapters.